With all the great Charlotte Mason subjects that we include in the week, when do the children have a chance to play? Let's talk about it. I'm Sonya Shafer with Simply Charlotte Mason. Welcome to another episode of Your Questions Answered. As usual, my friend and co-worker Laura Pitney is joining me, and here's the question we're going to discuss today. For elementary students, how do you balance all the subjects and still give them plenty of time to play together?
That's a good question.
I think what we want to do is let's try to walk through a typical day and talk through what the schedule would be like and add up how much time is involved, because there really is a lot of time to play in my mind.
Yeah.
But let's add it up and see. So I'm going to give you a calculator so you don't have to do mental math right now.
I think there's this misconception that it takes all day, to do these subjects. So I'll be interested to see the real time if I don't mess up.
We'll find out. Okay. Let's start with, let's say at breakfast, we're going to do scripture memory. That takes 5 minutes.
Got it.
And good for you. And then after that, we're going to sing a hymn.
Okay.
That usually takes 5 minutes or less. So let's just round it up to 5. We'll be generous with this. After that, they're going to do their chores, which you can count as schoolwork, but you don't have to.
Sure.
Then we're all going to regather. And if we're talking just elementary students, let's say we've got a first grader, a third grader, and a fifth grader.
Sounds good.
To make it convenient. All right. So we're going to all gather together and do our history. And our history is going to take about 20 minutes, maybe 30 if I get long-winded. So give it 30 just for wiggle room. After our history, we could do a picture study.
Okay.
And that usually takes 10 minutes?
Yeah, at the most, I would say, for
sure.
Okay,
give it 10 minutes for the picture study. After that, maybe we're going to read our science together. So that would be another 20 minutes or so.
I'm doing good over here.
All right.
I haven't messed up yet. All right.
And then we might do our poetry. Let's just review some of the poetry that we've been working on memorizing, or let's read a new poem. That'll take about 5 or 10 minutes.
Okay.
We'll do that. Now, at that point, we're going to send the fifth grader to go read on his own.
Okay.
Some extra history reading that he's going to do by himself, independent work. While that's happening, I'm going to work with the first and third grader. That's right, I had a first and third grader, didn't I? Okay,
yes.
All right. The baby's crying, but first and third grader. We're going to work on our math and language arts, because those are the things we have to do individually. So let's say I'm going to work with my first grader initially, and we're going to do a reading lesson.
Okay.
Those are only 10 minutes long.
Get it?
10 minutes for the reading lesson, and then maybe we will have him do some extra playtime or work, and we'll discuss that in a moment. Okay. While we then are going to move to our third grader and have the third grader practice her reading aloud for about 10 or 15 minutes. Okay. Give her 15, sure. We'll be generous.
Sure.
And then we're going to do her math, and that'll be 20 minutes, a 20-minute math lesson. Now, she's basically done. We're going back to our first grader to do a 20-minute math lesson. So give him 20 minutes as well. All right? Now, they've got free time until lunch.
Okay.
After lunch, let's do nature study, shall we? And we'll take, what? You want to take an hour? You want to take 30 minutes? How much time do you want to take for nature study?
We usually take an hour, just because I don't like to feel rushed.
Give it an hour. We'll all do that together, and then long about snack time, 3 o'clock, somewhere in there, we're going to read, as they have their snack, I'll read our family read aloud together. So what, 30 minutes for a chapter?
Yeah.
At the most. If we're doing Charles Dickens, it might be longer, but so that's a typical day.
Okay.
How much time have we spent?
I have almost 4 hours.
4 hours. And if we started at 9 o'clock, that's pretty generous.
Yeah.
Starting at 9, going till 12 is 3 hours. After that, well, if we did our nature study and reading, we could stop actually at like 11:30, 9 to 11:30, and then after lunch, you'd still have another hour or two. that leaves a lot of time
It does.
for play.
It does.
Before supper, between supper and bedtime.
Yeah.
It should leave a lot of time for play.
Right. Now, we didn't mention all subjects that you could possibly do because you don't do all the subjects every day. And that's something important to remember, that what we just gave as a representation is modeling a typical day, but some of those subjects will rotate in and out.
Exactly. You're not going to do science every single day in the elementary years. Right. You're doing, we could swap out too. We did picture study today in our typical day. Tomorrow we might do music study instead, but it's still going to just take that same time slot.
Right.
And you're not doing nature study every day in the afternoon. You might do a handcraft one afternoon instead. Yeah. So you can swap things out, but you still should not be dragging it out longer than the 4 hours.
Right.
All right, now let's back up to, while I'm working with my first grader, what's my third grader doing? My fifth grader.
Get them right. Don't you know your own kids?
No, I don't. Actually, I don't. They keep changing their ages, you know. They have birthdays and things. And don't ask me to remember when their birthdays are either. My fifth grader was reading and doing a written narration. So at some point, I would have had to meet with that child as well. So that might have added on 15 minutes to read their narration. But still, we're at 4 hours. But while we're doing the individual work, the math and the language arts individually, one-on-one, what's the other child doing?
That's a great question. What I've done in my home is anytime I'm one-on-one with one of the kids, I know what all the other kids are doing. So if they're the younger ones, I may rotate. Mondays, you can get this play box out. Tuesdays, you can get this play box out. So those type of situations, I would consider them still doing school type activities that are fun, that they would probably consider to be play, but technically they're purposeful activities. So
talk to me about this play box idea. What's in this magic box?
Well, it's one of those things where, you know, if your children have access to everything they own at all times, usually you find them getting bored with it or not knowing what to do. So when my children were younger, I would say, okay, on Mondays you can choose from magnets or you can choose from Lincoln Logs. So yes, those are toys, but I feel like they use really good skills to be creative.
They're exploring science concepts. They're exploring geometry and how shapes and architecture, if you will.
Right.
You know, yeah.
So even though those were my choice, I felt like it was purposeful for them in that playtime, if you will. So I would have a list for each day of the week that said, okay, when you finish early or if I'm working with one of the older kids, you can go choose a play box. And so it would still give them the freedom to choose because they like to feel big, but it was things that I wanted them to do. And so I think there's a distinction between using that structured school time and incorporating purposeful play into it versus saying, we're done, go do whatever you want kind of thing.
Yes.
So which is also good play because they can be creative and play with their siblings and that kind of thing. So,
but it can also distract you from focusing on this child who you're doing the math with when you're saying, I wonder what they're getting into and I wonder what they're doing.
Exactly. So I just, I still utilize that time for it to be an investment in that school umbrella, if you will.
Yes.
So I felt like my kids really enjoyed that playtime, and they liked being able to choose one of the two things or maybe three of the things. But it just, for me as the teacher, I felt like we weren't wasting time.
Yes, that's a good point. We also have the episode I did one a while ago with ideas for independent work that is not busy work.
Yes.
And so we'll leave a link to that in the show notes in case people want some more ideas as well. And we'll leave your text number in case they want more play box ideas. No, I'm kidding.
I know that's not a new idea, and I think it goes back to, you know, so many of us are overly blessed with possessions in our home, almost to the point that it is debilitating. And so
we call it clutter.
Yes. I was trying to be nice about it. So again, it's thinking, okay, what do I have already that I can pull out of that free access pile and utilize as a tool for me during their school time hours? And I would consider that purposeful play.
Yes.
For sure.
Yes. Especially in the elementary
Yes.
years that
Yes.
we're talking about.
Yeah.
Thanks. If you enjoyed this podcast, be sure to subscribe through iTunes, Google Play, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, or your favorite podcast app so you don't miss an episode. You can also subscribe to our audio version of this podcast or read the blog post on our website at simplycharlottemason.com. All of those links will be in the show notes, along with the link to those independent work ideas that are not busy work. And if you have other questions you'd like us to discuss, leave a comment and let us know. We want to make sure we get your questions answered. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.